Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
What's going on, everybody? Garden Report time. John Zannis, Bobby Manning. In this new era of Celtics ownership, Bobby, which is still the buzz and honestly still the thing that I'm most interested in. But we'll wait and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I know a lot of people in the chat have questions. We'll also be joined by Noa Dalzell in a moment. As soon as she's ready, we'll pull her onto the screen. I think we got Noa ready now. And that's it. That's who we got. This is your crew tonight, guys. I hope it's good enough. I hope it's good enough.
I think we'll get
but
back.
The Celtics win 121-99 in a, what was expected sort of outcome here. Game played without Jaylen Brown. We have some Jaylen Brown news. We'll get into that in a little bit here, but we'll start with tonight's game because that's what we're here for. It's a post-game show. So we'll get the panelists' thoughts on how the game went down tonight against Utah. Pesky. It was, what's funny is almost felt a little closer than the score, even though you never felt you were at risk here. Utah kind of hung around, was a little bit annoying. We'll talk about them as well. Tell you real quick, our sponsors here at the Garden Report, of course, there's always Prize Picks. Great time of year to get in on the action here with the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Download the app. Code CLNS, play 5, get 50 instantly. Prize Picks, run your game. And of course, Game Time. Terrific app here where you can get into any game, any concert, anything that you want to go see. Game Time is the place for you. Great features. Again, download that app. Code CLNS, $20 off your first purchase. Let's get going with the game here. Opening thoughts here. And I think KP is obviously going to be the story. And if we start there, I'm perfectly fine with that. But Noah, what were your primary takeaways tonight?
Yeah, I thought early on Tatum was great, and you could just see that when he slows down, he's just at a different level than I think he used to be. And sometimes in these games, you can kind of see it, not just the stat line, not just what he's, not that he didn't put up crazy numbers today, but you were able to see just the way that he's processing the game is just different than it was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And then obviously Porzingis, he looks 100%. I don't get how he does it. I don't get how he comes back from these prolonged absences in 3 great games in a row. And tonight he was just a big reason why they were in it early on. And Pritchard was my third takeaway, but I'll save that one.
Okay, save it.
Yeah, you mentioned, John, midway through the third quarter, it gets down to 2, which is pretty amazing when you look at where the score ended up here. It was a 17-point game before that. It ends up being a 15-point game right after that. So there's this flip in this game where there was some doubt, where there was some competitiveness. Sexton's 9 of 11 start. That's the one thing I'll say that probably mattered from this game that we've talked about forever. Those quick guards, they still give them trouble. They still have a tough time staying in front of those guys. He just completely by their defense early and often in this one. But Tatum gave him a good foundation. Porzingis held them up through the middle portion there. I thought Pritchard, Cornette, those guys gave them really good minutes in the second half to extend that lead, and then put the starters on the bench early, which I want to see more of here. 30 for Tatum, 33, just 26 for Horford in this one, 24 for Porzingis. You want some of those lower minute totals, 23 for Holiday as well in some of these games, even if you do end up playing the starters here. And these are games where you should be able to separate yourself and end these games early. So all in all, I think you got what you wanted to out of this one. It did feel like, to your point, Noah, that this could have been a special Tatum game. But it did end up where he's just tossing the ball around a little bit, going through the motions once they got a lead. And it ends up being more of a mixed bag for him after that one to me. But still, what he did at his best in this game still puts him in position, to me, where he's going to end up third in that MVP vote at the end of this year, which, might not cause anyone to throw a parade, but I do think it's another step for him in his ascension in the league here. So if he can just play these games, put up the stats he needs to, and they roll down the stretch here and finish pretty solidly in second, and we'll see with that 1 seed at this point. It's probably out of reach. The Cavs are losing again tonight. And I think it's at 6 games now, right after their recent low. So
Yeah.
that's
Were there
probably
some
out of
things you
reach.
guys?
But
Yeah.
we'll see.
Were there some things that were different tonight? That it definitely seemed like they were cutting more than you see them doing.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah, and so like I noticed like I've always wondered, how much the Celtics have treated the regular season like preseason, like NFL preseason, just kind of playing straight up vanilla, sort of stuff. But they were definitely cutting a lot of good off-ball stuff there. Some, really signature plays there. I think the big one was the Holiday following the steal and the thing with KP. But there was quite a few people that did that. That was something I hadn't seen as much of. I'm trying to kind of pull
No, they never
myself back
cut,
in.
John.
They never cut. That's what I mean. It's just seeing it a bunch of times, a few times. There was quite a few plays here, and I'm trying to pull them all out in my head. You had Pritchard finding, someone on one. Luke, great pass to Luke.
KP found Drew one.
Yeah, that was the
a fun
great one. Yeah, and then Luke was the recipient of one, but he smoked the layup there. But there was a bunch of those where you just don't see it, and I love that. Maybe it's NCAA tournament time, and you're thinking of like Princeton basketball and backdoor cuts and actions and all of those things, and that got them all excited about it. But I like to see that because again, it's just easy baskets any way you can get them. What's easier than an uncontested layup when your guy fell asleep and you beat him on a backdoor? It's just classic. It's the best thing. And again, you always want to find them, ways to manufacture more baskets when they're going to be taking 53s a game. And then your top 2 players are continually just their game is always going to be tough buckets. So I liked seeing that out of them today.
I'm always amazed at how little the Celtics cut compared to like Cleveland, for example. Because if you look at it, last year they had the best offense in NBA history. I think this year they're at like the 5th best offense in NBA history. So clearly like their offense is effective. And so I never doubt it because it works. But just from like a basketball mindset, like you would think that they could just implement that a little bit more and it would benefit them. So I'm always surprised, but it was enjoyable to watch. There were moments where I was like, why do they seem a little more fun to watch right now? And I feel like it was that. Just a little bit more movement than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, the big passing too early in this game. There's some fun stuff with Horford and Porzingis, and they got out on the break a lot too. This is also a game talking about things the Celtics never do, forcing turnovers. I mean, they never forced turnovers in this game. They were just running in transition constantly after Jazz turnovers. Jazz turned it over 17 times here, and I think that was mostly Utah just being awful. But White had some impressive stuff at the half court. That got them going out in the other direction a couple of times here. It definitely was a game that felt different than the average Celtics game where it's mostly just the driving kicks and mismatch hunting and all that. And I know Jaylen has a little bit to do with that too. They had to play in some different lineups and they experimented at times too. There was a centerless lineup. They were doing some pressing. It's definitely that time of year.
Yeah, and so the 2 things I noticed the most that you don't see a lot of, which made this an interesting, kind of fun, almost atypical sort of Celtics game for me was, are you guys both looking at something to the left of you? Both of you guys were like this at the same time. It's like
I'm looking at you.
do you both see something over there? The cutting and then the steals, the activity on the defensive end of things. What was the final number here? They came up with what? 13 steals on the game.
Oh, 13
what?
steals, yeah.
13
17 turnovers.
Yeah.
There was a couple of times where Tatum just read the double team, and I feel like they got away with some things that maybe against a better team you wouldn't necessarily get away with, like some cheating defense, which was fun to watch in this game. But yeah, it was definitely, it stood out, especially when they blew the lead a little bit. They just came back out and were very clearly going to put their foot on the gas. And this is one of those games where it was like, I want to say it was a little bit inevitable that they were going to make a little comeback, but it never really felt like the Celtics lost control of the game.
Yeah, and it's not done yet, but it is an interesting development here as we've pretty much resigned ourselves with the Celtics to the 2 seed for a long time because it just seems that it's been headed that way, and Cleveland had such a big lead. It's probably still too big a lead to catch them, but the Cavaliers are getting smoked right now by Phoenix, and this lead is going to be down to 5 games. Again, it's probably too little too late, but this Cleveland's headed for their 4th straight loss here. It's getting a little
wild
here. I think if you got within 3 games, you might start thinking about it. I don't want to think about it though, because I think the Celtics are in a really good place with where they are right now. You did have the news prior to the game that Jaylen Brown is out again, that knee thing, whatever's going on. He's going to miss this game and the next game. And so he missed 2 of the last 3. So that's going to be at least 4 games in 5 days. And he's trending towards that, falling short of that 65 game barometer that's set for postseason honors. And honestly, the sooner you take that off the table, the better for Jaylen, so he doesn't force his way back into the game, so he can be healthy.
So that's where my head went, John.
Last thing in the world you want right now is for them to think that they have stuff to play for in these last few games, because I want to see starters resting, not just playing 25 to 30 minutes in a game, but missing games entirely, getting yourself right. I've tweeted this tonight, but I've said it on the show before. Kristaps Porzingis, having missed all of this time, I think has been a blessing in disguise, because I think he's just going to round perfectly into shape heading into the playoffs without nicks and bumps and bruises and wear and tear. And also just putting him out there, the more you put him out there, the more likelihood something weird's going to happen, because 7-footers get hurt all the time. It's just what happens. But I don't know. I don't know like what would have to happen here for this to all of a sudden become interesting enough for the Celtics will do it. I don't think it's going to change their approach down the stretch. I don't think they're going to go for it, so to speak, even if they did.
The reality is, if you look at their schedule, they can rest guys and they should still be winning.
And still win.
Games.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
And in fact, if you look over the past few years, like they don't miss a beat when they're down 2 starters against like these average teams, these below average teams. So you want to make a push to win all these games, like you're going to do it anyways. And that shouldn't impact the resting schedule. Like you're thinking about this Portland, Sacramento back to back, like they're going to split the guys up, 3 off for each game probably. And they're going to probably win both, and they should win both. The thing is that it's now the ball is in Cleveland's court, right? Like they still need to continue losing games. It would be kind of insane. It would mean that they lost like 8 of their last 12 games for them to blow this lead. The one thing that it did bring me to is that I felt like during the season that it didn't really matter this bad 6 weeks that the Celtics had, because Cleveland had such an insane regular season that it wasn't even within reach. Whereas now you're kind of sitting there being like, you actually did have it in your control. Like Cleveland did open the door, and it might be too late now, but it does give you the feeling at least of like, had they been a little bit more consistent during that stretch, like the number 1 seed was up for grabs. Whereas for a while I felt like it didn't even matter because Cleveland was so ahead of them in the standings.
Or even in those 2 games against them that you blew badly, and you get the tiebreaker just by taking one of those. Cavs do have the tiebreaker right now. That could flip, but probably not either. So that's another game in hand that they have effectively there. So I don't know, looking at their schedule, I wouldn't count on it. Like they got the Jazz and Blazers and Spurs. There's a lot of gimme games for them, and they've just been winning games so consistently this year. They would be pretty shocking to see it go the other way.
Yeah,
for them. They have the Jazz tomorrow as well. So yeah, I don't think they're going to catch them. I don't think they need to catch them. And I've compared the season of 2023 a couple of times at the worst, John, and I was really bummed that they didn't get the 1 seed that year. I thought that was a lost opportunity for them and something they needed that year. I don't feel like they need it this season. I think it's just going to be more about where they and Cleveland are at that point, health-wise. I don't think home court's going to impact that series much at all. I also feel like the game 7, that's the big thing going way back, John, is game 7s are usually decided by the home team there. I feel like that's gone the other way in recent years here too, where that's not as big of a deal either. Like I do feel like the Celtics could go in there and win a game 7 on the road. They've won big road games in the playoffs on the road previously. So I'm not super concerned about that. I'm just concerned about the Cavs in general, just because of this force they've become here. And to me, it doesn't matter if it's in Boston or Cleveland.
Yeah. And I've said this before. I do think that I left this up on the screen. I kind of agree here. I think with Cleveland that they have been going all out. And one of the reasons my panic meter is never high with the Celtics is that I really feel like they haven't tried all year. And by not tried, meaning you win, you lose, we're okay. Like took some nights off, we're okay with it. Frustrating sometimes for fans or for media that wants to, carve out an agenda about how they're different or how they've gotten lazy. But I just never felt it. I really did feel that they were fine for the most part, even though it is annoying and you didn't want to see it drag on too far. So I do think it's possible that Cleveland, I'm not going to say punched itself out, but really played like full on as hard as they could almost every game this entire season.
For sure. And I think a couple weeks ago, I did a podcast episode with my dad, and we were talking about the other contenders and like who seems most concerning, I guess, in the postseason. And I think my big thing on Cleveland is that they had really faced no adversity this season. They had no major injuries, like to any of their key players. They never had a losing streak. And so it's kind of weird that now it's happening in late March, because on one hand, it's like they are getting that bout of adversity that they should have before the postseason. Like, you don't want to have your first challenge when you're down 2-0 or something like that. So maybe it's a good thing for them, or it's not ideal timing. But it is interesting that they're kind of running into this. OKC still has not really had any losing stretches, but they have dealt with like key players missing time. So I think that like the Celtics talked about it during that time in December and January, that they felt like if they could get through that period, it would make them a better team ultimately. And now I do think that they're better for that period.
Guys, I've been panicked before. You've seen panicked. This wasn't panicked. I was annoyed. I find it annoying, but I never ticked past the middle on the panic meter. I never did. I never did. I didn't think it. I haven't panicked about Holiday. I haven't panicked about Porzingis. And someone here asking, what's the panic level on Jaylen Brown's injury? Also pretty low. I don't think that this is a serious thing. This isn't
a good update.
Huh?
I thought that was
It's
a good
fine.
update, actually.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's not structural. Whatever an impingement is, it's rest. Whatever's going on there.
It's a bone bruise.
It's fine. It's fine. I mean, it's annoying, but it's not. He didn't tear something, sprain something. It's not an MCL. That's 2 to 4, 4 to 6 week. He's okay. He'll be fine. I think this is perfect right now what they're doing with him. So yeah, the panic is generally low. People did want to, yeah, I do. I play it up a little bit, and yeah, maybe I am it's boring if we don't try to, try to do it a little bit, right? Someone did say that we want to put John's early season panic in the bracket. We didn't, but we have lots of things in the bracket, which I'd like to introduce to you right now. There's voting going on. Guys, which ones are up right now? I actually don't know. What are we voting on? Amit, you guys tell me. Oh, Jason, I'll get back to your super chat. I apologize. You see the bracket up here. We're going to be running it throughout. We've got a 1 versus 8. Guys, someone want to tell me what we're running right now?
It's
vegan. Vegan. No, the producers. Vegan versus so we're running 1-8 right now. We are in the phenomenal region. We are running vegan brownies versus untrained eye in a matchup right now, a poll in this game. And then staying in the phenomenal region, blame pie versus these are the two matchups going on in the bracket right now. Your votes throughout this show and on Twitter and social media, where we'll have the poll up, will determine who moves on into round 2. We're going to be doing one chunk of the bracket each game leading up here until we whittle it down from 16 to 8 and onward from there. And so that's where we're at. It is vegan brownies versus untrained eye. Yeah, that's not going to happen. And blame pie versus do we have an drop?
What is who does that?
Tatum.
Oh.
He does do that.
He does a lot of it.
I thought it was one of you guys. I was like, I'm not like, it's not recognizable to me.
No, he does a lot of it. He does a lot of it. Anyway, so back to this, back to the game here. I'm not super worried at all about Jaylen or really anything here. I'm not worried about Drew Holiday. Bobby's a little worried about Drew Holiday. He did a video for CLNS Media talking about his woes. And again, whether that shot turns around, I don't really know. When I'm watching Drew Holiday, I don't see a different person than I saw last year, just in terms of his movement and what he does and his ability. And I do think that, like, again, the box score is going to say 8 points, 3 for 6, and he missed his only 3. He got another 3 blocked, unspectacular. But you're walking away from this game and you're seeing Drew playing free safety and going back there and picking off that pass and then running that give and go with Porzingis, which was beautiful. And other moments where I thought he really stepped up on defense at times. I just don't have a level of concern there.
Yeah, I mean, he's not who he was last year. That's just what it is at this point in the
He's
season.
just not
given the
shooting the way
productivity.
he was last. He's not shooting the way
Right.
he was last year. That's
Yeah,
all.
and
That's
it's
all.
just
That's all I'm willing to concede on Holiday.
Yeah, it's not even the shooting though. It's just the lower level of involvement. And the 3 games before this made me feel a little better because of how involved they got him. You had the first Brooklyn game where he's running point in the fourth quarter. You had all the shots he took and made against the Heat there. Both those made you feel really good. But even in a bad shooting night in the second Brooklyn game, he's super involved on the ball. I think he had 8 assists in that game. Still a ton of activity in that game. And then to just not have him involved in the first half of this game at all, I think puts him back in the place where I'm just concerned about a great defense being able to force him to do a lot. And that's still where I think you're probably just losing a little bit of what he gave you last year if a team's like, all right, take 15 shots, take 20 shots, and they just concede that to him. Is he going to be able to make you pay to that degree? And this is Utah. It's the worst defense ever, I think, statistically. Wasn't Grandy tweeting that out with the points per possession there? So he scored 8 points against this team in the second half, didn't really score until midway through the third quarter. I know he had the great play there, but it doesn't dispel the concerns I have about him being able to carry some extra weight here in certain games against tougher defenses. I think that's all I said there, but you can't say anything critical or negative to this space, or they're just going to go, why? Like, I'm just going off his productivity this year, John. And I'm not saying he looks much worse or is physically limited here. I think that might have been part of the struggles earlier in the schedule, but it's never really fully turned around for him this season. And unless he just goes on this heater down the stretch here, I don't know what else to say other than maybe like Al Horford, he's saving it for the playoffs. And I could buy into that, but that's just believing that it's going to turn around come postseason time.
I think the reality is that last year, who he was during the regular season, we had a lot of the same questions around. He wasn't super involved in the offense. I remember there was a game versus Denver where they basically weren't guarding him, and Celtics lost that one at home. And it was like, okay, you have this guy who was literally an all-star last season, and why are we not seeing him more involved? And then when he needed to during the season, like he was able to during the playoffs, he was able to step up and have those big scoring performances. I think his 2 highest scoring performances the Celtics both came in the postseason. So it's tough. It's like the same thing with Al, where there is a track record, and so you just go with that because you assume that there's no reason that he's not going to be able to kind of step it up. And especially like versus Cleveland, I think if Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell are guarding him, he's smart. Like he knows it benefits the team if he's aggressive. So I think in stretches you saw him be aggressive tonight. It's almost like he has a switch where he's just playing the connector, and then there's moments where he's like, okay, I'm gonna go assert myself. And I think maybe Derek White mentioned this to me in Miami, that he felt like they could do a better job of trying to utilize him offensively, like almost like they kind of forget sometimes too. You're muted, John.
That's on the bracket. It is. We had that discussion when he went off in that game of him trying to beat you different ways. And, you'd made the point that half of his shots are threes and he's not really able to just kind of do what he wants. When he does, he can still get there. I mean, he can bully his way to the rim. He can drive. He can do that. I mean, he had a couple of instances where he did that tonight, one where he ended up missing a layup, but he can absolutely do that. I think he can assert himself on both ends when he wants to. It's really more a snapshot. I'm not looking at numbers. I'm just looking at the guy. If I watched him move around and play basketball last year and watched him move around and play basketball this year, he looks like the same person to me. That's what I'm basing it off of, as opposed to like, this guy doesn't look right at all. I mean, I remember Rob Williams when he came back at the beginning of the season off the second surgery that first year, and I'm watching him. He has no lift. He has no lift at all, and you could see it like clear as day. And people were like, "Shut up, John. He dunked." And it was we were right. Like he didn't. You could see it. He looked like a different person than he did before. It was noticeable. I don't see that with Holiday, so it's never really been an issue. Voting is, I wouldn't say 5, but maybe. We're going to go a little past the 30-minute mark, and then that first matchup, Noah's Vegan Brownies. if you want to vote for it, that's going to close up. So you got to get in on the action here if you want to vote your say, but it will be open for a couple more days as well. So, you can jump on Twitter or social media and vote with all of your handles as many times as you want. While we wait for Bobby to jump back on here, just let you know about one of our sponsors again here at the Garden Report. And of course, I'm talking about Prize Picks. Check it out here. Prize Picks, number one daily fantasy sports app. I got to get the bracket off the screen. Put Prize Picks on the screen. And that's it. You see it. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. 2 players win up to 1,000 times your money. When you download that app, you see it right there. Play 5, get $50 instantly in your account. Win or lose, doesn't matter. When you download the app and use the promo code CLNS, lots of great options and action and different things. Free squares, Taco Tuesday, Freaky Friday, and again, tournament time right now. College basketball. Lots of opportunity to get involved and get in on the action. So again, download that app, code CLNS, play 5, get 50 instantly. Once again, download the app, code CLNS, play 5, get 50 instantly. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's see if we can get Bobby Manning back into the fold here. What's up, Bobby?
How's that?
You
Looking
look terrific.
good. Thanks.
Sharp dressed man.
Yeah, hopefully I'm back here. Yeah, do you guys keep going on holiday?
We did. Then we ended the conversation and decided that you're wrong.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I guess this team's just going to roll with the championship. There's nothing to even discuss.
Yeah, that's it, Bobby. Sorry, you tried. To the point, go ahead, Noah.
No, I was going to say, I think some of the defensive things with Holiday, and I haven't completely compared the film, and I'm not going to say I'm 100% confident in this, but there were a bunch of quicker guards, like the SGA types, that he also struggled with last year during the regular
Always
season.
been the case. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just, the big thing is that it wasn't like he had this spectacular regular season last year, which then preceded the playoff run. It was like he had a kind of similar season. So I don't know that we can count on it to be recreated. He is 34 years old. I think if you're going to pick some uncertainties around this team, it's the guys that are aging, have they're a little bit more of like a, roll the dice on where exactly they're going to be. So I understand why Bobby, he's one of the guys that you're keeping your eye on. I think you could say the same about Al, but people are really inspired by the fact that he's had some big time performances against big teams in recent weeks. So everybody kind of has that comfort that he can do it. But he is one of the guys. I mean, the 3-point shooting has been the most drastic change. I think of anybody on the team. I think he's down like 10% from last year. The reality is it's not a huge, it's more of a spacing thing than the actual shot production, because honestly, how many was he attempting last year, right?
It's 5 per game.
And he's not amazing around the rim either. He'll blow some layups that you're just like, so it's just about being a threat somehow. And again, he's best with the ball in his hands. And I don't know how they can create those situations when everybody's healthy and when they're running their normal offense, but they can definitely do more than one pick and roll a game to me, because then you just have to guard him and he's going to do good stuff out of that. So I think they're going to have to alter his role a little bit if teams are ignoring him, and teams are going to try to ignore him. And to the Horford point, the fact that you do have 2 guys who are down a little bit this year that you can just hedge off of a little bit. The Thunder did it so well in that game last week. And again, I'm not concerned round 1 against Atlanta. I'm not concerned round 2 against the Knicks here. It's when you get into the late stages of the playoffs with those defenses that are really versatile and really disruptive and able to just cover a ton of ground and all that. So these are the little things that can make a difference at the highest level of competition this year, because there is high level competition out there, as we've talked about. Muted, John.
I want to put up the super chat here from Jayson Tatum, and thank you, Jason, for throwing this out here. We talked about it a little. I don't know about, we were talking about cutting and just looked a little different. Things did look a little different to me, and I can't quite put my finger on it with a lot of what they were doing. So, I would have never thought this game would be worth a rewatch, but I might rewatch it because I'm kind of curious, because some stuff looked a little different here. And who knows? And, people in the chat will be like, well, there's no Jaylen. But I don't think that's the case there. But there was some stuff going on there for sure that I liked tonight that you don't see. And as I said, in a very basic way, a lot of it just had to do with the movement and the cutting and the off-ball stuff, which I thought was a little bit better. So yeah, and thank you, John 77. Celtics and Panathinaikos forever. That's one of the Greek clubs. In Greece, Olympiacos and Panathinaikos were Red Sox Yankees. They were the only two that mattered. Once upon a time, you were on one side or the other. You had to declare. Two camps. That's all it was. Anyway,
Still get some good players on those teams.
yeah, you do. I think Neek played for Panathinaikos, Dominique Wilkins, in his year in Greece. It's possible. We didn't talk a lot about him because it was the obvious lead, and we kind of went in a few different directions. But obviously, Porzingis played well. We don't need to sit here and say Kristaps Porzingis played well. But I know, Bobby, you did some digging into some of the numbers here, which is like this odd thing where Kristaps Porzingis plays well and nobody else does. Sometimes with the Celtics, and like he looks good, but they're not playing as well. And we talked about early in the year when they tried to integrate him, and someone had put it in here in one of my Twitter comments too. And I've always wondered this. So I'm curious your guys' thought. Him being such a cheat code, it's almost like, how like the Sam Hauser defensive rating was based on teams constantly trying to pick on him, getting out of their role, getting out of their offense, and it, everything kind of falling apart there. And then, the teams in general were just performing worse because they were so single-mindedly trying to do one thing, which was to attack Sam Hauser, and their entire offense fell apart, and Sam Hauser had the best defensive rating in the league. It's almost like this with Porzingis, which is, it's every time there's a switch, it's always a mismatch. You could literally go to it 110 times a game and it would probably be okay. And like, it's almost like, why would we not go to it? But it does throw you out of your rhythm, because then it's like, okay, Kristaps, be tall and we'll just all stand around here. And then it either, bears fruit or it doesn't. So there was some issue integrating him in there, because when it's there, it's almost negligent not to go to it. But when you do nothing but go to it, it can throw you out of rhythm. Do you think they've figured it out, or are figuring it out, or will figure it out? It's almost just, I don't know why it worked so well last year, and then this year it seemed to kind of jam them up a little bit. Just how often to go to him and how it affected everything else.
I think they're going to need some more time here, which is crazy to think about, because they just haven't played a ton with him, especially in big spots. And we're 2 years into this now, and he had the stretch last year that was amazing in the regular season. Then he goes down in the playoffs. Then you missed start of this year, come back, you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out a little bit, and so you get through a year and a half of his time here, and he hadn't really played in too many big games with the other starters there. And Horford's at the 5 more often than not there. Even when he came back for the finals, Horford's still starting those games. So that's what my mind goes to here. I think it is something, I think, Noah, where they go to him in that high post area and everybody stands around a little bit. So the ball is never really going to move out of that spot when it goes to him. But that's true for Tatum and Brown too, when they finally get to the end of their mismatch there. So I think it's just about, when push comes to shove in a series, who's guarding who and who's going to be taking the most shots, and are they ready to make them? And that's not something I'm concerned about with Porzingis offensively, is his ability to make shots, his ability to win those matchups. So if they're going to give up the size to him inside, or they're just going to ignore him on a pop, I don't have a ton of concern about his ability to put up 27 here, hit the threes or whatever it might be. Now, if I'm a defense, I'm making him pop, because I think his three's a little more erratic than the inside game, which is just automatic. But offensively, for me, I don't have a ton of concern with him. It's a different style, but I do like when him and Horford play together, because I think that does kind of create a balance for them a little bit between what they do with Horford out there and what they do with Porzingis out there.
Yeah, I think there's a balance where on nights where they're struggling to shoot, and there have been many of them, then he gives them another something a little bit more versatile offensively. Like, he can be a little bit of a cheat code. What I haven't liked is, like, I'm thinking back to the Lakers game in LA, where they were hunting that mismatch from the beginning. And I think like Max Christie was guarding him a couple times. And at the beginning, I was like, oh, this is great. He got a couple easy buckets. And then I realized like they're totally going away from their identity as an offense, just exploit this, like not even that great of a mismatch because Max Christie was doing like a decent job and Porzingis like missed a few. So I think it's just about finding the balance. And especially when you're playing against like the Oklahoma City Thunder, and we saw how they were pushing everything out, that Jaylen was struggling, Drew was struggling. Like, yeah, you want Porzingis to be on the floor there. He can just give them another dynamic offensively. But I don't like when I look at the box score and Derek White has attempted 6 shots and Drew Holiday's attempted 4. And I think that is something that if I was on the coaching staff, it would be a concerted effort to be like, okay, we also need to make sure that the guards are involved offensively because it just makes this team so much less dynamic when they are playing below what they're able to do. And I'm looking tonight, like Derek attempted 8 shots, Drew attempted 6. And it's like those shot attempts have to come from something, but that's not sustainable.
I know. And it's especially not sustainable when you have Jaylen Brown out there, because
Right.
if you're going to have these mismatches, you got to get KP his looks. And again, it's just going to be a math problem there. Somebody's going to come up short and you're going to look at a box score and say, how in the world did blank only shoot the ball X many times? So I don't know why it wasn't an issue last year, but it has been to a degree this year.
He didn't
and I know
play
some people,
last year, John.
well, I mean, not in the postseason,
During the
but throughout
season.
throughout the regular season, he played plenty and every time he was out there, you're like, they'll never lose a game as long as Porzingis is there. There was an air of invincibility about the way they went about things there, where everything seemed to work seamlessly. There weren't a lot of times where you were left wanting because they were beating people so badly. You would just shrug your shoulders and be like, oh, it was KP and Tatum's turn tonight, or it was Brown and Brown and Derek's turn tonight, and it was fine. And that's still the case. Just the results haven't been as overwhelming or as resounding as they were last year, and maybe that's it. And maybe it took him a little time. He was playing a little out of shape. They were forcing the issue to try to get him in there. Then he had another long respite. You've gone all year really without your starting lineup, and I don't know what the numbers are, but they're bad, right? Like how many times you've had the full starting lineup? Very, very few. So
It's come around a little bit, I think.
They're still working through it. You kind of hope that I kind of think it's going to all sort of perfectly come together, but also you're going to stretch people. You're going to be resting people down the stretch here. So you're not going to get a lot of reps with your starting 5 and everybody as healthy as they can be.
Starter's still a slight negative this year, which is crazy because they were so dominant a year ago.
Crazy. Yeah.
And it is the offense, down to 112 offensive rating with the Porzingis lineup, 122 with the Horford lineup. So I don't really know what to say about that. I think the default is going to be to start Porzingis, and that makes sense because he's just so much better than Horford offensively at this point, and you're an offensive team. So I don't begrudge them that, but I do think closing games is going to be an interesting conversation a lot of the time because, especially on the defensive end, like they're just both so different. Like if you want to take away threes, Horford's by far the better option. If you want to take away the paint, Porzingis has been out of this world at doing that this year. And again, tonight, the blocks and helps and all the different stuff he does on that end. I can see, John, why they're so addicted to playing both of them together because they're both just so different and they play off each other so well. And you get the best of both worlds when they're both out there. So that might end up being how they handle that, is just go bigger, play those two together. Have them both shooting threes and doing their own thing out there and hoping that it solidifies the defense too. But who are you taking off the floor in that situation? Is it Holiday? Is it Brown? Is it White sometimes? Like that's the dilemma when you do go double big, is that someone has to come off the floor. And obviously injuries are going to happen and stuff too. So it does help to have this flexibility. But for some reason, I haven't been able to make sense of it all year, Noah. When he's out there, he does amazing and he makes every shot and he does all this crazy stuff and the team doesn't benefit from it. Like they play a little bit worse with him out there. And I don't understand. It might not even be his fault. I do think a big problem is that they have him just play way back and give up threes.
Yeah, there's been weird stuff like that before. Like this isn't the first time I've seen a player whose individual performance, this is a WNBA connection, but like Asia Wilson on the Aces last year had like one of the best individual seasons ever. But her team's offense was like better when she was sitting a lot of times. And it was like this big question of like why that is. And I don't think anybody ever got to the bottom of it, but there's a lot of like 3-point shooting variance. So I haven't like totally done a full analysis of the numbers with both lineups.
I think
will
it's the
say that
threes.
a lot of times during the regular season, you feel like there are too many offensive options on this team. And I think this team is more enjoyable to watch when two stars against most teams, against the most elite competition. You want to have everybody. But on an average night against Utah, I think this team is genuinely better when two starters are sitting because everybody wants to get their points. These are the nights you get your stats. And with two guys sitting, there's more baskets to go around. There's more touches to go around. There's more minutes to go around. And I think people just from watching this team over the last few years, I do think they benefit from it. But like we talked about yesterday, Bobby, when we did a podcast episode, like during the playoffs, it's just about how many things can go wrong and mitigating that. And if Jaylen can't hit anything or Drew's ice cold, then you're going to want Porzingis to be more actively involved, right? Or if all of a sudden Al Horford's slumping, like I think the reason I want him around in the playoffs and the reason why these games are important is because somebody's going to play badly. Somebody's going to get hurt. Like it's just inevitable that not everything is going to go according to plan. And the more guys you have that are available and healthy and in rhythm, the better. And we just don't know who that's going to be. We don't know that last year Tatum couldn't shoot in the playoffs, right? And they were able to overcome that with other guys stepping up and him doing other things. So that's the big thing in my perspective.
Oddly, they're more fun to watch when starters sit because the ball doesn't stick as much, touches more people's hands, and you get to see people sometimes doing things they don't do when everybody's healthy. The Holiday game last week being one example. Obviously, the Shireman off the bench game very recently. It really bummed none of his threes fell tonight, but we're not going to get into a.
Can I just say real quick, because I just want to, for all the people who are like Shireman's going to replace Hauser, what are you saying tonight? Like what?
I'm saying people shouldn't. I'm saying everyone, because again, there's a higher ceiling in people's minds with Shireman because he's a first round draft pick. So you're just waiting because you want to believe there's something better out there. And, you want to move, same thing with like, Keita over, it's like, oh, it's something new and it's exciting and maybe it's going to be really good. But I mean, we should know by now not to, and Bobby, look, I'm not, you do this. You see one game and you're like, wow, look at this game. So, I mean,
not the guy's first game ever.
You do it. Sometimes.
I'm a Shireman guy, and I stressed the other night.
I'm saying you make definitive conclusions off of individual games. You do. So
I think
off a guy's first night ever after not playing the entire season prior, I just really needed to pump the brakes on that one.
Yeah.
I think part of the what I think why people are thinking about Sam versus Baylor, because it really is not that right now, is the fact that Sam's on a much more expensive contract over these next few years, and inevitably, as much as I hate to make this a discussion topic, but I know we'll probably get into it, but inevitably with the second apron and the luxury taxes and everything, they're going to offload some guys, and Sam Hauser is one of the names that I think is on the table, as well as a bunch of others. And Baylor's on a rookie deal, and you're going to need really cheap guys to perform. So I think that's what's exciting about Baylor, is the fact that for this team to extend their window, they're going to need guys on really cheap contracts to be impactful players. And that's kind of how Brad has done it over the past few years, whether it's Luke, whether it's Sam, who's currently on a minimum still, whether it's Payton signing what I think is one of the best deals in the league. So I think that's the excitement around a young talent like that potentially being a part of the rotation. It's not necessarily saying for the same dollar, this guy's ready today and he's better than Sam. Like that, I think that would be a hard case to make.
Yeah, Baylor Shireman over me. Not going to happen.
I want to see him stack some games here. I think that's where we need to start.
Again, it's a play for next year. It's not for this year, but I understand why people get excited because it's the new shiny, thing. And as Noah put, there's a practical, aspect to this as well in terms of what you're going to be looking at down the road. You need people to step up, and so people got a little excited, but it's certainly not anything that's going to change what goes on in the court this year. We're going to talk a little bit more about this game before we wrap and we kind of move on to the owner stuff. Again, the bracket is up. You can vote right now on the, come on guys. Why won't these things clear? Get out of here. I don't want you. We'll put it back up. The bracket right now, we're in the Blame Pie versus and Blame Pie is taking it to right now, pretty severely. If you want to have a say here, you can jump in and have your vote. You can also go to our CLNS Twitter. I also want to tell everybody again before we introduce a new segment on the Garden Report about our friends over at Game Time. And again, I love Game Time. This really is one of my favorite apps to use. I do like to go to a lot of concerts. I like to score last minute tickets whenever I can. It's great for games, obviously. So if you want to check it out, you want to go see the Red Sox when they kick things off, absolutely. There might be a hot ticket this year. People might be slow to get there. You might be able to get some good deals. We will see. Obviously, Celtics stretch here, and those playoff tickets are going to be tough to get, and you're going to need someone like Game Time on your side. Terrific panoramic views from your seat, all-in prices, great features there on Game Time. Super easy to use, very intuitive, and all you have to do, you see it on the screen, download that app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Once again, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS, $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Going back in here, and again, I know everybody thinks we're negative all the time and all of the blame pie, but we've been teasing it for a while, and we're going to tonight introduce it's an interesting choice of music there, but we're going to do a little credit. How do you slice up your credit cake for this evening? We'll start with Bobby.
I'm just so happy.
Oh, you're muted. Bobby?
Oh, I was saying Noah's got to be first in line for this one.
It's vegan credit cake. We're slicing it up tonight for the first time. Let's go.
Let's
Go
hear
ahead,
it.
Bobby.
Oh, I'm going first?
Yeah.
Well, I think you got to give Porzingis a heavy helping tonight in this one, at least 33% of this one, because just dynamic early, set a tone. No one had an answer for him on that team. Tatum, I think, probably a little less, let's say like 30. We're going to do a weird percentage there, 63. So I guess I'll have to give 27 to Hauser, who I think deserves a lot of credit from this one. Was just awesome, hitting shots, and just an underrated performance in this one. I don't think he got enough credit for what he did tonight and what he's doing lately too. So that brings me to, what are we talking? 33, 30. I'm pulling a Jimmy right now.
Here you go, Jimmy. All right.
Got to pull out the calculator now. So we got 10% left. I'll give 5 to Luke and 5 to Derek White, who had all those steals and timely shots in this one as well, I thought.
I like it. Noah?
Didn't save any for Holiday, sadly.
I was crunching numbers. Did you completely ice out Pritchard?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm icing out Luke, so it's even.
Yeah, Bobby's automatic slice goes to Luke, even though he certainly doesn't. He was fine though. I mean,
you could have done without a Luke slice tonight. You could have done
but
without.
Luke ends up a game high plus.
Luke had 3 blocks.
17 minutes.
Nice, good.
Yeah.
This is tough. Sorry, I'm looking at my math here.
Blame pie is so much easier.
No, it's not. This is releasing endorphins,
You might have had the blame pie quicker.
No, probably not. Well, I'm just involving more people. I guess compliment cake is usually a little bit more comprehensive. Don't you feel like you want to give Luke his 5% versus blame pie? It's like 80% this guy. So I have KP 25, Pritchard 15, Hauser 15.
Oh God.
What am I at? 30, 55.
You're at 55.
Drew 5. Derek 15. What am I at?
You're supposed to be tallying it.
55.
I could barely do my own.
60. I gotta start doing these before we go on so I can have it ready. Tatum 10. And then everybody else can have the rest.
No Porzingis?
Oh no, Porzingis was 25. He was the first one.
Oh,
Did I not say it?
I didn't hear it, but you might.
That was tough. I'm sorry. That was tough. It's hard because it's like when you're giving out credit, it's like, okay, this guy can get a little bit,
John's got his calculator.
Yeah.
I'm tallying it. No, I'm gonna go Porzingis. I'm going to give him a big chunk. I'm going to give
He's
Porzingis.
ginormous.
I'm going to give Porzingis 40.
Yeah.
I'm going to give Tatum 20 because even though this was a ho-hum, I barely want to be here sort of thing, the thing that Noah talked about earlier, where it's like when he everything is moving so slowly for him, that when he just decides to flip it into takeover mode, it gets there so easily that it's just not.
I hate when he
It's-
has more than 5 turnovers, though.
I hate
Tatum?
it too, and it was a
But he
sloppy,
was so
lazy.
important in the first
It's
quarter.
a sloppy,
Yeah.
lazy game, but he was important early, and then
Yeah.
he did what he had to do late. So I'm still going to give it to him, and then I'm just going to give out the rest of it very, very simply in 10% slices. I'll give Sam his 10 for coming in here. I'm going to give Luke his 10. I'm going to give Peyton his 10. I'm going to give Drew his 10. I'm giving it to him. That leaves 10 left over. I'll give that to Jaylen Brown for taking the night off and letting the kids play and people spreading things out
That's
here.
the only time John will give Jaylen.
It's the only time Jaylen Brown gets any credit cake. He's just sitting it out and letting everybody else have theirs. And
Joe
also
won 2 challenges tonight, by the way.
And also Joe was good with the challenges, and also Jaylen not worrying about any postseason accolades or forcing his way in there. I swear, last game he was running hunched over. I don't know what he was doing playing.
I wanted to get into that.
He's definitely got to get out.
So he came down in that Thunder game after the dunk, right? And that's what really looked like he tweaked something on. It didn't look great before that, but that's where it really looked like he did something there. And then sits out the Miami game. You're thinking, oh, all right, here we go. This is going to be a long stretch where he just sits out and gets right, but comes right back in for the Brooklyn game, gets hurt again, and we haven't seen him since. And so was he pushing for the award before? And now where it's like, oh, you took a step back, it's like, oh, all right, we can't do this anymore. I'm just wondering what the methodology is in terms of holding these guys out versus putting them in, because there was a long runway there where he could have just sat out and got right, but he came back for Brooklyn and, had to, go down at the halftime there. So I don't really understand what the plan is with him right here.
Well, I think the one thing I would say, Bobby, is that, he talked about this one of the games. I can't remember which one, but he said, like, this is part of his process of gearing up for the playoffs is
His journey.
Yeah. And I think there's something to the fact that he might end up sitting like the 2 weeks before the postseason. Like that impacts you, especially because he's not somebody that, like, I always give credit to Porzingis for how he's able to come back from extended periods of rest. And every time I say that, I think to myself, we don't really know what Tatum and Brown would be like in those situations because they very rarely miss significant time. And so I think there's an element of like that too. And at the same time, it's a bone bruise. That's what he got diagnosed with. And a bone bruise, I don't know if either of you guys have had a bone bruise in your knee, but I've had a bone bruise in my knee, and it's literally like the more impact, every time you run on it, you jump on it, you're literally continuing to aggravate that bruise. Like it's what it sounds like.
That's what I'm saying. So why did he
but I don't
come
think
back?
I don't
He shouldn't be playing
again.
I don't know that they even knew that he had a bone bruise. Like I think that he had said a couple of games ago, like, we're gonna get it checked out further. Like I don't know that they knew exactly what it was that was bothering him. You have to get an MRI to like confirm it.
That's what I'm getting at, though. Like, what's the process they're going with these guys right now to get them the rest they need, the recovery they need? Because again, there just wasn't an urgency to get them back for the second Brooklyn game in my mind. So again, these things are so hard to talk about because we don't know anything. But yeah, I think it's Brown pushing for it. I think there's an award implication there. And now it's at the point where
he's not getting any awards this year. I'm sorry.
So that's where I was going to get to, John. Now it's at the point where it's like, all right, he probably isn't getting it anyway. So now, is he playing or not playing based on award right now? Like that shouldn't be the methodology.
We don't have any reason to think that. I mean, people have started speculating that, but like that's complete speculation. And maybe it's true, but it's complete speculation. Like nobody has said within the organization. I haven't seen one report of actual like sourcing on that. I think everybody started doing the math.
All we have is him before that Miami game, John, looking really rough, not moving well.
All we have is him being really upset for not getting these things in past years, and he does take it seriously, and he does take it personally, and he does feel that he's been slighted and robbed, and he does campaign for himself quite a bit during the year. So I think he has an eye on these things. I think he wants it. I don't know if he's forcing himself into the lineup to get to the 65. That's all speculative, but I do believe it's important to him. I just don't know how important or important enough to put his long-term health or the success of the team at risk. But
And remember,
you
Noah,
just have to save. Sometimes you just have to save people from themselves, whether it's noble intentions, selfish intentions, a little bit of everything, or just kind of like, I'm fine. I'm fine. Leave me alone. Sometimes you just got to stop people. Yeah.
Well, remember, Noah, too, after that Thunder game, again, where he looked pretty rough all night, never really moved well in that game and played poorly. He came out after and was like, this is the best I felt, going back a little while here. I feel like I'm really starting to turn the corner. And then they sent him out of the Miami game. He comes back for the Brooklyn one. I thought he looked good early in that game. It looked like he was back to himself a little bit, and then he goes down with the back spasms there, and then he's out ever since here. So I'm
probably
just
connected.
Yeah, I'm just confused about what the treatment management plan is with him right now. Like, can he just come in there and be like, I'm playing, I don't care what you guys say? Or is there actually a process in terms of whether he's sitting out or, playing at this point in the season? Because he wasn't looking right before the Miami game. That's all I can really say here.
I mean, he missed 2 games for this knee before the All-Star break. So this is now spanning, 6 weeks. And about a couple weeks ago, he said, and I wish I remember the exact game, but he said, that he's going to check it out, or he's going to look into it, like the knee. Like, he didn't have answers at that point. Now they have a very specific diagnosis of what is wrong. And I'm sure that aids the front office or the, medical staff or whoever it is in basically making a case for why he can't be playing these games, because a bone bruise, again, like I said, it literally gets worse the more you play. It's a complete aggravation thing. Some things aren't, right? Like Drew's talked about this year, how there's been multiple injuries that he has just wanted to play through because he didn't think that it was going to benefit him to rest. And he's missed a few games, but like he's made it pretty clear to us, like he wants to play. I think it's just sometimes there's the question of like, does it actually even really matter if you're playing or not? And this is, I guess they probably got the medical results and it made very clear, like there's no value in him playing. But he's dealt with a bunch of things this year. Like the knee was the last to come around, but there was the hip strain, there was the shoulder. It's been like an unlucky or unhealthy season for him relative to years past and relative to like Tatum, who really hasn't had much, minus the thing that he keeps being listed for his right knee. But I don't know that that's like a very serious
Again,
thing.
I hope the priority now is just getting it 100% right, because there's nothing to play for the rest of the way, including the award. And I know some people are talking about in the chat, he doesn't need the award for financial reasons at this point.
Right.
And again, I don't think it's attainable for him to get the award at this point.
It was attainable.
Maybe if he goes into the last 2 games and plays 15 minutes in those, but now that he's going to miss these next 2, it's
right. It
like
was before this stint. It was.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I don't think it's attainable now. So now there's no reason to push it the rest of the way. So I hope there is an extended runway for him to miss some time here and actually get this thing right.
And there's no reason to grieve, or worry about it. If it's gone, it's a foregone conclusion. You weren't eligible. Then there's no disrespect. Then there's no anything. You just play. You're there to win. It doesn't matter. It's off the table.
It's good. Yeah, like there's no
doesn't mean anything
anyway. Or that you can just say you didn't play enough.
JB likes these things, and a lot of these guys do. They want.
No, it's a big award.
Even after you get paid, they want it. They want to stack these up because
it's a barometer.
It's legacy. It's padding that resume in your prime years. You want to be making it there before the kids come and take your spot. So
and he barely missed it last year. Remember, he was the
16th in the voting. Exactly. So that's what's going on there. I do want to move on to some of the stuff with the Celtics ownership group. Bosto with the Celtics ownership group there. What do you guys think after the benefit of 24 or so hours to parse through it all? Just thoughts on this, because there's some interesting stuff today and some more questions that I had that I now have even more strongly. But I
think the first thing I'd say is that we're going to want answers sooner rather than later, obviously, because that's what we do. And I don't think we're going to have any sense of what this guy's going to be like as an owner for quite a while. Like, I think it's going to take a long time to actually understand like what he's just saying and what he's actually doing. And even if he has like a money dump trade earlier on in his tenure, I don't think that necessarily indicates what kind of an owner he's going to be, because that was probably inevitable anyways. Like that was going to happen with Wick or with Steve Pagliuca or whoever else. He has good PR right now. He's saying all the right things. He got the right stuff for the Globe, the quotes, the encyclopedic knowledge, and the growing up as a fan.
He said one
good
thing
PR.
that I'm going to get to that I didn't love.
But I'm not going to like overreact in a positive way to a guy knowing, obviously very successful person, knowing what public relations are and how to make a good first impression. He was, you know, telling Chris Forsberg that he's a big fan of his and Abby and stuff. Like, that's smart stuff to say. You should say that. But I'm not gonna like make much of an impression around a guy having a team of advisors that are clearly advising him correctly, right? It would stand out if he wasn't doing it. If he was like coming out here and like, coming off like a jerk, like, okay, that would stand out. But yeah.
Yeah. So Noah asked me if I watched the interview, and I did get into it, but I couldn't get too far after the Forsberg thing because I'm just like, all right. So I'll let that go. And then credit to Chris. He asked the most important question, and the only question anybody really cares about here, which is, are you willing to spend?
Yeah.
Are you willing to spend what it takes to run this back and, you know, win these championships and all the rest? And the way he answered the question blew my
banners.
He goes,
we want to win banners. It was such a programmed boilerplate answer.
This team has a long history, and Red Auerbach was here, and we're trying to raise banners here, and so that's why we're partnering with Wick Grossbeck. And I was just,
look. So again, this is the it's not. We're not saying
all you had to say, John, was we're going to do what it takes to win. It doesn't promise
our
anything.
Goal to have a competitive team, but it doesn't matter if he says that because it means nothing. John Henry every year says our goal is to have a competitive team, and we're not.
But him immediately dodging that question doesn't sit right with me.
Sure, but that's fine. So, and here's what's happening. Here's what's interesting in terms of the PR blitz. One, I find it very interesting. We don't have a press conference, which I think is honestly ridiculous at this point. How in the world do you have a story of this magnitude?
Because everyone's going to ask him about the money, John,
and not make the guy available. What are we doing here?
They also did it at the beginning of a 6-game road trip, so nobody's here, and very few reporters are going on this trip. So,
there's not a lot of people on the trip.
Right.
Like reporter wise. Yeah. So I get it. They're away. If the plan is when they come back because the entire team is away.
Noah's saying they might have done that intentionally.
This was a good time from a PR
to announce it with everybody.
You want to limit the media involvement. And I'm not saying that's why they did it, because I'm sure there were other factors at play, but it was convenient timing that it was the day before the longest road trip of the regular season.
Yeah.
No avails all week.
So that happens. Chisholm does his little puff piece interview at NBC, and then he disappears, and it's rah, lifelong Celtics fan. They tried really hard to hammer that, and as Noah said, they're smart.
Encyclopedic knowledge.
This is PR. It's even got the anecdote when I went to a game when I was 7, and I've been a diehard fan since then. Who knows and who cares?
Did the Guns N' Roses video.
It's fine. But Wick Grousbeck is like shockingly to me, and the weirdest part of this whole thing is Wick's continued involvement in this. Why are we listening to Wick today go on a media blitz?
Wick was out on Causeway Street holding court
because they retained him. And so like Wick sells the team, which he didn't want to sell in the first place. Dad did, makes it incumbent on the new ownership group that they retain him. It's honestly possibly one of the reasons Pags didn't get the team because of this caveat that had to be involved. And now Wick is the one who's out there kind of doing the PR spin, and taking bullets potentially for Chisholm. Can you answer a question, or are you going to spend? No, because no one's going to spend. This is a losing proposition for any owner, whether it was the old one or a new one coming in. But now Wick's out here, and he's going out, and he's
this was so BS.
The payroll issues. It's not a luxury tax bill, he said, and this was on EEI. It's the basketball penalties. The new CBA is designed by the league to stop teams from going crazy. They decided that it's not good enough to go after the wallets because the fans are like, hey, find someone who can afford $500 million. So whatever it is. So trying to make it seem like we're not cheap, but it really hurts your team. That's fine. But then the second part, the penalties mean there's more premium on how do you have to have now it's like put it on the general manager. So your brilliant general manager's got to figure out a way to get you out of this, basically, because you've got to navigate. You can't stay in the second apron. Nobody will. I predict for the next 40 years, no one is going to stay in the second apron for more than 2 years. So
Yeah,
this
because
is
the
very
owners
much
aren't going to let them.
the owners. This is very much laying the groundwork for, yeah, duh, we're going to have to make cuts here. And again, I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I don't, it's understandable. It's business. It's the business of the NBA, but also like people aren't stupid and you should probably stop treating them as such. Like people have to know what's coming down the tracks here. It's just interesting how it's being positioned and framed. And it is a really awkward position for a new ownership group to come in here. But you do have the flip side of that, which was the Pags offer, which came in. And you're talking about Pags saying, since they announced it, blah, 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 we tried and we did this and we did that and stewards and all of this stuff, but where he says here at the bottom of this thing, I partnered with all these people, deep resources, maximize success and ensure that we can always compete. Luxury taxes be damned. And then continues on by basically saying we made a fully guaranteed financed offer at a record price befitting the best sports fans in the world and all of that.
So much PR going on here.
We had no debt or private equity money, which again is a shot at what's going on here with the current group. And that's it. Basically, we had a better offer. It was reported by Axios, recently that it was the third best offer in terms of dollars.
Pags?
The third highest offer, fully financed.
I'm sure the other.
But he was not going to retain Grousbeck as the CEO. That's part of the offer. So again, you've got these different things at play here. And again, everybody's smart enough to understand it. The owners want to take the most money possible. They don't care if it's finance. It's like you sell your house. You don't care if someone pays cash or someone, takes out a $2 million loan. As long as the bank grants that loan, that money's going in your pocket. That's great there. Could you talk about the fans as kind of shareholders or almost, people that you want to do right by as well? Sure. And a fully financed offer is better for that because you're not beholden to people who want their money, when it's time to collect, and a bunch of people saying, what did you do for me? It's really interesting because you don't know where this guy's money's coming from here. And it's just so interesting. We have on top of that. And again, I got to make sure it's loaded up here. The New York Post piece, again, adding to this was really wild. Talking about who is Bill Chisholm. And it talks to a bunch of executives who, are quoting here, and it's one guy goes, I've never heard of the guy, a top executive at a major sports franchise. And then another saying, we bought a company from Symphony. That's his company. That's how I know him. It doesn't add up. If he had billions, we'd know about him, or he would have had a bigger fund at least. Again, his fund manages 10 billion. The biggest ones out there manage $1 trillion, and the firm that he works for is described as doing a lot of deals with mid-level companies. So they're kind of like a middling play. Look, we're talking about the richest of the richest of the rich. These guys are all fine. They're not wanting for money.
You know what's funny?
Yeah.
So you know how there was the 4 names that came out, the finalists?
Yeah.
Like obviously I read that list and I looked into them. I have no recollection of seeing Bill on that list. And I went back to the article.
I remember.
I know that he was on there, but there's something about this guy that's so not memorable that I kind of get the CEOs, because I was thinking to myself, I've never seen this guy's name before, and I had to go back to prove it that he was on the initial report. The other 3 offers were much more memorable to me. So I think he's just something about this guy is just so anonymous that I actually buy these reports.
And everyone in the industry thought it was going to be Pagliuca.
He's like a ghost. And I have one of my buddies in private equity is like, look, you don't know. Here's what you don't know is he doesn't appear on Forbes billionaire lists. He's not the kind of guy that you think is coming in there with the deep pockets. He's not. Obviously, very few people are Steve Ballmer, who has 122 billion wealth on his own, who literally could pull $2 billion out of his pocket to buy the Clippers.
So you said it, John. Is this guy Wick, who's at 5% here?
That's the thing.
The real money's elsewhere.
Exactly. And so now you're worried that the money's coming from other places. So again, it's not fair to speculate, but everything around it is odd because it doesn't seem like a single deep-pocketed investor who came in here. It feels like that money's coming from somewhere else, and it feels like those people are going to be pulling
at the very
strings.
least,
Yeah.
you had Wick and Steve, in lockstep, and they'd be making decisions toward winning with everybody else in line.
What if he's AI?
Well, they already have Coach GPT.
That would be great.
Yeah. So previously, you knew everybody involved, John, and even the guy we didn't know, Irv, at least would sign the checks for Wick that Wick wanted. So now you need approval from all these different outside people and outside sources here, including the other private equity firm here that also owns the Spurs. So I don't know
Before
how
it was
that
one
works.
person. It was Dad. Yeah. Can I please get Porzingis,
right.
Dad? No, it would be Wick going to Irv.
So now all these people are gone. Yeah. And so, the money's gonna, Noah, you said it, the money was gonna come down at some point anyway, unless it was a Bezos type. And none of these finalists were that, even Pagliuca. And as much as
that guy either.
As much as I think Pagliuca's statement there was pretty ominous about what's going to happen here, I think his, vision of how much they were going to spend is probably a little bit of spin there too. So,
somebody
that aside,
I just wanted to put this up here. I'm talking to a few of my friends who, swim in these waters. Granted, not at this level, but they this is what they do, and that's what one of my friends texted me about. This is, you don't know. It's plausible that this guy pulled together a consortium and he contributed the most money, right? So he's at the 5% and everybody else is coming in at 3 and 2 and blah, 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 and all this. But he said equally, if not more plausible, that 6th Street or some Saudi prince is just financing the whole thing behind the scenes and you don't have any idea. And that's the whole thing, is until you see structure, you don't know. And it is interesting.
And we won't know.
It is interesting that Pags put in a statement like, we're still here in case this thing goes bad. So they might look at it, and the league, it's already funky, right? Like, this is what's weird is,
so
it didn't have to be this weird. The 51%, then retaining Wick and all of this stuff, it didn't have to be that weird. You just put it up for sale and a bunch of people are going to come flying in and say, I will give you a bunch of money for it, because it's the Celtics and that's what's going to happen. But I am curious if it is really funky. I think the league already doesn't like how they got to this point. They didn't want to do the 51. They didn't want to kick it down the road to the rest of the sale later. They didn't want to set precedent there. And now if they look at it and the financing is funky, you do wonder if they're like, can you do something
The league
else
likes
instead?
how expensive it is, though.
Huh?
Right.
Yeah, they do, because it's raised everything. Yeah, it's raised everything.
And they're going to expand because the league's ready for expansion in my eyes.
But now those expansion teams are $5 billion, so right out of the gate,
I wouldn't expect there to be any issues with this. Now, I do want to go back to the stupid second apron thing, because it drives me crazy. And it's one thing for the owner to say it, but for all the cap people to come along and be like, yeah, it's not the luxury tax, it's the second apron. For all the cap people to come around and be like,
who are the cap people?
Listen, do you think he's saying cat like CAT? Like
CAP.
Okay, good.
Are you talking about like media people? Like,
yes.
I haven't seen anybody except for Wick. That's why.
Who went behind him and were like, it's not the tax, it's the second apron stuff here. And listen, I get it. There's some prohibitive rules here with the second apron, and there's some stuff you have to consider long term. But if you're the Celtics, like, can we just talk about what we're really discussing here, which is they can't sign a mid-level guy. They can't sign a buyout guy. Their pick can't be traded in 7 years, and they can't do certain trades. What about any of that would make you get rid of Holiday and Porzingis? Like, it's not that stuff. It's the $500 million.
It's the money.
It's the money.
It's again, people aren't stupid. It's the money. It's the money.
They created these convoluted. What they basically did was they created these convoluted rules that don't really make sense to the average person, or they don't really think about. And so you just say, oh, there's these crazy penalties on you if you'd spend too much. And everyone just goes, oh, yeah, crazy penalties. So, yeah, you got to get rid of these. It's the money. And they actually jacked up the luxury tax payments here, or the penalties in the luxury tax if you're a repeater team. And so it's just more about the money, especially if you're a team that isn't a Balmer or isn't, one of these ultra rich owners that can just eat that if necessary. It's the money. And it just drives me crazy that we can't talk about what it really is here when it's so clearly the money.
But
You
again,
have the team you need right now.
But again, it's and Derek put it up here, and I've been saying this throughout. It doesn't matter who. It's happening no matter what.
Right. That's the thing.
Nobody's spending this. Nobody. Wick's not wrong. It's
I mean,
just
Steve Ballmer's not in the second apron right now. He's the
Yeah.
richest owner in the NBA. They're not in the second apron.
yeah.
I think the only
and
teams right now are Minnesota and Phoenix, which is ridiculous. But
I think that's specifically because of the George situation, though. Like, if they felt George was worth keeping, they would have done it again.
Yeah, but I mean, you're letting somebody go for nothing. They knew they were taking a step back. They just didn't. They just wanted to reduce
Right.
payroll.
So
at all costs.
if you're in one of those situations, it does get interesting because you can't sign and trade them out, and you can't get stuff back and all of that. So you do kind of have to make a decision of, are you going to keep them, or are you just going to let them go and benefit from those savings? Because they brought in other guys, right, like Derek Jones and X, Y, and Z there. So I actually do think there was more thinking there than just the money. But the Celtics have everybody back next year. So, like, again, for second apron reasons, why would you be offloading players if you're the Celtics? There just isn't one to me.
this summer.
Right.
Yeah.
Meaning you would take every penalty that would come your way to keep the. If money wasn't an issue, you would rather have this roster and
about
deal
Al?
with. I'm saying you'd rather do if you're not worried about money, you would rather have this roster and deal with all of the second apron penalties and that includes dropping your draft pick, not able to make trades, not able to sign free agents. If you're just worried about the team, you're going to keep it. It's not the penalties, it's the money. It's the
now
money.
a year from
penalties
then,
are bad, but the money's the reason you're dropping there. Because again, I think I saw one figure where Horford signing Horford is like,
and that's still just money.
It's $8 on the dollar, it's you sign him for it's $3 million, it costs you 25. Someone just put that Hauser's 10 is 90. It's insanely punitive. The money is the reason you're doing it, not the penalties. The penalties are bad. The money is why you're getting out. So it is a little bit of,
if one of these guys was a free agent, maybe you let them go because there's a balance between the long term and short term and all that and blah, 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 blah. But everybody signed. And that's the reason you signed everybody, is so when the time came, you could just run this back if you wanted to, or maybe you could flip some guys in and out. You just had all the guys intact, except Horford, as you mentioned there, Noah. But even Horford's just money to keep, and Luke as well. And, that's getting pretty far down the roster there. But it just... When it's about money and the owners construct something that kind of makes it murky about whether it's about money or not, I just get really irritated when we just run with that, because it is just money in this situation specifically. Now, a year from now, when Porzingis is a free agent and you're like, all right, are you keeping him or are you letting him go for long term? Like, you're 3 years into your run at that point. Maybe your run's coming to an end, but you have everybody signed. You have another real chance to win a championship next year with this exact same roster, you would think. So there's no real reason to move off anybody other than saving on the luxury tax. And so I don't want to hear it from Wick that there's this second apron stuff and, oh, it's on the GM. And that's where I'm going to actually get really interested on Brad's role in all of this, because we talk about Wick not wanting to be the face of a teardown, John. What if Wick's like, oh, Brad had to tear this down because
Brad's being set up here.
Yep. And
Brad's
that's where I get
up,
worried about Brad's future. Like, is Brad going to want to be the face of this?
If I'm Brad, I would strongly consider not being around.
Well, this is like the Bob Myers move, where it's like, quit while you're ahead. Quit while you don't have to make any difficult decisions. I mean, it's kind of what Wick's doing. Wick signed everybody. Everybody was like, we got the best owner in the world. He's riding off into the sunset, and he didn't have to make any difficult decisions. Like, again, this is the thing.
It wasn't even his money.
Is that if Wick was not selling this team, he would not be paying these fees to keep his roster together. There's a 0% chance. He just is never going to have to live that reality out. So he won here. And I saw somebody say this, that part of why they signed all these guys and they went into the luxury tax was to up the value of this franchise. And again, I'm not going to get into like all the business happenings because there are smarter people that can talk about that, but there is something to that where this franchise could not be at a higher point right now. And the price that they sold for exceeded everybody's expectations by a lot. Nobody had them valued at 6-7 billion, and that's what it sold as. So you go back and you think about all the extensions and the Supermaxes and Jalen's and Sam's and everything. And ultimately, like, there is an element of like, this didn't come out of nowhere, right? They announced the team was being sold between Derek White's and Jayson Tatum's extensions. Like, it was in the thick of everything. And so it does make you go back and think. I personally think most basketball fans probably don't care like that much about the psychology of like the Grusbeck family or the Grosser family and like all the little things that were happening there, but it's going to matter when somebody gets shipped off. I just don't know that Bill is going to be the reason why that happens.
It doesn't. I think it's two different things, right? If the owners have to, if this group or whatever happens next involves players getting moved for cost-cutting reasons, everyone's going to blame ownership, but as again, it's well established. I think anybody would have done that. What you want, generally speaking, with your owners is for them not to be in it for profit, but to be in it as a passion play or for vanity. And that's the key. Is I someone whose business is something else, and this is where I make my money, and I own this team because I just want to own a team because I think it's kind of cool. Just rich people with their toys. That's the type of owner that you want. It is very scary to think of a guy that nobody's heard of who probably doesn't have a ton of, money on his own that he put forth there, is beholden to a bunch of other people who helped finance this deal, who are going to be pulling strings behind the scenes saying, up, I need to see my return out of this. I invested in a business. I did not invest in you getting to, play, fun billionaire owner and like win for your hometown. Like, I want my money. So again, we're not going to know how this is going to look until it gets there. Wick couldn't have played it better. He was never really in charge. He was never really the principal owner. He got dad to pony. He got dad to.
And now he gets 3 more years.
He had us fooled for 20 years. He got dad to kick in all that dough so they could win another title. They sold it. He gets to line his pockets with the estate planning and stay on for 3 more years and continue to be that guy. I mean, he's just dipped in shit, right? Like, you can't be better than Wick right now. He's living the dream.
I can't believe he actually pulled this off because, again, John, in what world was a guy buying this team for $6 billion going to say, Wick, you can still be the face?
You run it, buddy.
$0.
You run it. I know I just forked over $6 billion of my dollars, but you stick around. You do the whole thing.
But
so
it still raises the question of what's this going to look like when the moves happen? Because I don't think if they trade Holiday for nothing this summer except salary relief, Wick's going to be there at the press conference, answering questions alongside Brad. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff at play and moving parts here. And obviously, as I've said, I don't know where the front office is at now, given that this is the way it went. And, I'm sure some people in the organization didn't quite expect it to go this way, given all the momentum that was behind Pegs there. But I do think the thinking after those extensions was take it year by year. If you win the championship, there's probably a better chance everybody comes back. If not, you're probably going to have to make some tough decisions after that. So is that still the thinking now after this move, or is there going to actually be some directive coming from ownership? Because every time we've asked Brad, Noah, he has basically said he has no idea what's going to happen there because he's been kept out of the loop. So I do think Brad's the next guy I want to hear from here. He had the conversation with Chisholm. They're going to have to start to map their future out almost immediately now this summer, given the money that's going to be on the books going into next year. So will they have a directive? The one thing, John, I think with this with this former ownership group here is they never gave Danny directives. They never gave Brad directives about things that they had to do. If Chisholm goes to Brad this summer and says, you got to cut X dollars, is Brad still going to be here next year? That's the next question that comes into my mind.
I think Brad's engagement is going to be a good temperature check for us. That would be the ultimate red flag is if Brad loses faith in the process, and he's kind of done what you can do. I mean, the GM position, and again, it's only rewarding for a certain period of time.
Yeah. And again, if they have to move Holiday, like this was going to have to happen no matter what. No. And they probably had to have some understanding of that too. So if you have to move Holiday here to cut this off a little bit in terms of the money, I don't think that's something that's going to make Brad leave. But once you get to the Jaylen stuff, and again, John, I think that's really where Brad's at. Like, just based off everything he's done so far, the way he's managed this, I think every intention he has is to build around Jayson and Jaylen into the future here. And I think that's where he's going to focus. But we'll see what actually ends up happening.
We will see what happens. Apparently, while we've been on the air, Kanye dropped an album on YouTube. You guys can go check it out if you want. Or you can watch Bobby Manning's video about Drew Holiday on our YouTube channel. You can check that out. Or you can watch You Got Boston latest episode.
I'd lean toward those two.
Yeah. The chat was talking about it, not me. That's not where I'm going.
I don't want to hear what Ye is saying right now.
No, you don't.
25.
I don't think anybody. Well, some people do anyway. Thank you guys for watching tonight's show. We took a little detour into the ownership stuff, but it's still wildly interesting. I can't wait for more nuggets. I found the whole process weird leading up to it. The timing of the announcement odd, and something smells.
I will
weird
say though,
about
John,
so
we were so
curious.
cynical. The last big ownership debacle here with the Brad transition and Ainge going out the door, we were so cynical about where that was going. It actually ended up being great. So,
but it might
this will
still
be
not have
great
been a good idea. It might have just they lucked into it, so we don't exactly know. But sometimes it works out that way. Shout out again to Prize Picks, our daily fantasy sports partner. Promo code CLNS when you download the app here. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the app, promo code CLNS, play 5, get 50 instantly in your account, win or lose. And of course, Game Time, great ticket vendor out there. If you want to go check out a game, check out a concert, Disney on Ice, whatever. Download the app, create an account, code CLNS, $20 off your first purchase, terms to apply. We are back on Sunday.
I have one more thing to say.
Yeah.
When we were looking ahead to Sunday, I said, can we please see Rob?
I was going to finish with that. Yeah, we're not.
And we are not seeing Rob on Sunday.
Yeah. Pour one out for Rob Williams.
Meniscus injuries, man.
We ruined him just to lose to Golden State. Just could have let the guy recover. I was against the surgery, by the way. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Who knows what would have happened? He was he might have been destined for this. This is who he's been his entire career, but it's a bummer. No Rob with Portland, but we will be back. Game time is 6:00, so it's an early show. We hope to see you all there. Thank you to Noah. Thank you to Bobby. And we will be back on Sunday. I thank you, of course, always to you guys hanging out in the chat, keeping it lively. The super chats, we appreciate those as well. We'll see everybody on Sunday. Take care. No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to feel that way. Let's
Yeah.
slide Al over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke an hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke